Recently, I had a question in my ArchiCAD coaching program from architect Michael Kraus, who said he had a challenge dealing with feature windows and schedules. He will stack or gang multiple windows together to create a larger window set. However, the actual window will come to the site as a single unit, and he wants the window schedule to show it as a single unit, as well as the window legend. So let's take a look at the situation and explore some alternatives that I came up with for helping Michael. So here we have the project that he sent in, and a 3D view shows that it's a rather elaborate residential project. And when I zoom in this area here, we can see that there are some windows that are actually made up of multiple window elements. So you can see this is 1, 2, 3, 4 windows comprising what should be a single feature window. And down in this area we have a rectangular set of 1, 2, 3, 4 different windows making a single complex. Now in the window legend, we'll see that, as always, ArchiCAD is showing all of the windows individually. That means that, for example, this half-round window, which is at the top of the feature, is shown separately from the other individual ones. Now, sometimes ArchiCAD can put multiple windows as a single set, as a single library part, but when you need to be able to do things like he had here, then there's no way that it will automatically do that. By the way, he also has some interesting trim here. This is a beam element with a complex profile, and some of these other pieces are done with primitives such as columns. So how would you turn this into a single window? Well, I figured out a very straightforward way to do it, and I'll demonstrate that for you. Hopefully you'll be able to learn enough from this video that you can create your own combination windows custom whenever you need to. So here we have the 3 windows that we're looking at in this wall. To start out with, I'm going to select the wall and drag a copy of it down in front of the building. And then I will rotate this. Now the reason I'm going to rotate it is because some of the operations that are done with ArchiCAD on creating custom library parts for Windows will work better when the outside of the wall is at the top. And right now the bottom of the screen here is the outside of the wall. So I'm going to rotate this using keyboard shortcut here, rotate this around and drag it sort of roughly back into a similar array, location. Now I will create another couple of copies here because I'm going to actually do some manipulation of each of these, and I want to have several copies on hand. So let me take this one here. I'll actually go in and hide the marker, and we'll take the wall with those windows and look at it in 3D. So I'm using the shortcut that says show only what was selected in 3D, and you can see here the 4 windows in the wall. Now I'll select the 4 windows, and in order to turn them into a single window, I'm going to actually use the design menu convert selection to morphs approach. So what that means is that all of these windows will be converted into morph elements and will no longer be windows, at least temporarily. When I do that, you can see that the geometry of the windows remains pretty much the same, but the wall holes have changed because there are no longer windows, and now this is a rectangular opening here. Now you can see that the elements selected are morphs, and in fact there are 82 of them. A simple way to combine them is to go to the design menu, modify morph, and use the union command. This will then turn them into a single unified morph that has a very complex geometric form. I'll select the wall that had the windows originally and delete it because now these morph elements are freestanding. To turn this into a window, I can use a very simple approach, but because it's a non-rectangular shape, we'll have to make it a little bit more elaborate. Now I'm going to show you something that you could use for a rectangular set of windows directly, and then show a variation that will allow you to handle the non-rectangular shape. So to turn this into a window, a new custom window, I need to have an editing plane set to show where the face of the wall would be. So to do that, I go to the View menu, Grid and Editing Plane Options, and say Pick a Plane, and then just hover over this, maybe zoom in a little bit so I know that I'm on the face of the frame around the window. So that has now defined a plane, and that would be parallel to the wall when this new window is put in. I'll select the morph element again, and now go to the File menu, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Window. And when I do that, it asks for guidance on how to orient the window. The window, if it was set for the horizontal plane, would have to be lying down. In this case, I'll say use the current editing plane to define the wall plane. So that's the plane that I just defined. And I'll say Continue and Save. And just give it the name New Window 1. And fix one small issue with a missing fill and say OK. So this new window is now in the ArchiCAD library. If I go to the Window tool and open up the Windows settings, we'll see a rather odd symbol for this window, but in 3D it looks good. You can see how it automatically picked up all of that information. Now let's go and put that window into a wall. So I'll go here and eyedrop the wall tool, the wall settings here, and we'll put in another wall like this. Actually, we'll face it the other way so that it's similar to the other elements. And we'll select this wall and go to 3D. And then we'll pop in the window. Now when I pop in the window, of course it has the size that it needs to be, but the location in space needs to be double checked. So I'm going to set it to be the sill to the wall base, and I'll just set it to be a small value so it's a foot above the bottom of the wall. And that way when I pop it in here, we'll see that the window fits into the wall nicely. Now we do have, as I mentioned, an issue that it's cutting a rectangular hole in the wall, and of course this needs to be a non-rectangular one. So while what I just did would be sufficient for creating a new window that could go into a window schedule that had multiple pieces that were rectangular, it won't work very well for a non-rectangular one. So here's how we're going to deal with it. I will go and select these elements again and go to 3D with just those elements. And we're going to rotate them to lie face down. So this is the outside wall face. The other side would be the inside. And I'm going to rotate them. Morph elements are one of the few that you can rotate freely in space in ArchiCAD. Morphs and shells are the two that come to mind that you can just grab and rotate any way you want. So when you rotate, you go to the Edit menu, Move, Rotate, or use the keyboard shortcut. You now have a little compass. Now if I go to a corner point, ArchiCAD isn't quite sure what orientation that I want to rotate it around, and so it'll do a horizontal orientation. But if I go to an edge, it'll do it perpendicular to that edge. And since I want to make it go face down, I'll use that edge there, snap to the axis, the y-axis, and snap down to the x-axis here to make it a nice even 90-degree rotation. Now this element, if I go back to the floor plan, has been rotated sort of overlapping these other walls that I placed. So I'm going to select it here and just drag it down a little bit out of the way. Now in order for it to be turned into a window properly, we need to actually outline the shape that's going to be the cutout for the wall. So the way you do that is with the slab tool. And the slab tool, there are just a couple of peculiar things that you're going to do to make it cut out a hole. I'll put this on a layer that is convenient. So this is going to be the object creation layer. There's nothing particularly special about it except its intended use is for creating objects, and normally elements placed on that layer would be hidden. Now when I click to start placing it, it'll ask me, do I want to show that layer, because the layer was currently hidden. So I'll say, go ahead, show that layer. And let me just rotate this around and snap to the other side. So I'm drawing a rectangular piece. I snapped it to the bottom surface of this rotated morph window. And you can see it's got a very thin little shape. I'll make it a little bit thicker here by changing the bottom value. Now it turns out it doesn't matter how thick this is. What matters is that it is done with the slab tool and that the element ID has a name, wall hole. So W-A-L-L-H-O-L-E. If you have an element with that name, a slab, and you have a set of elements that you want to turn into a custom window, ArchiCAD will say, all right, this shape defines the hole, the rest of it is the actual window. Now, of course, I didn't complete the operation. I need to make this slab here go around the top of the window. So let me go to the story here, and we'll need to go to the layer settings and turn on that layer that I just put it on. So now you can see that slab has shown up. Now I'll just use some basic pet palette editing operations to add in a node point here and snap it where it needs to be. So add in another one and snap it. Then I'll take the center part up, and while I could arc it right away, it turns out that this geometry requires that it goes straight up here, and then I can go and make it follow the arch here. And now that's a pretty clean shape following the original half round window there. All right, so now we're going to go to take these elements that I've just got defined and go to 3D. And I have one more thing that I need to do before I turn it into a window. And that is I need to select these elements and make sure that the bottom face, the face of the wall, so to speak, is actually at the 0, the project 0. So I'm going to do drag, Command or Control D, click on this corner, and then type in Z or Z and say 0. So this is going to put these elements down, way down below where they currently are. So I'll hit Enter. They disappear for a moment. I'll say Fit in Window, and now you can see they have just repositioned. When I use the M key to measure, it says, oh, Z is 0. That's perfect. That's what I wanted. So now I can go to the File menu, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection as Window, and instead of using the editing plane, I'll use the horizontal plane. So that horizontal plane will be the 0, project 0 horizontally. And I'll say Continue and Save. Give it a name, New Window 2. Fix this one little issue with the fill and say OK. So at this point, I now have defined a new window, which, as you would expect, when I go into the window settings, it looks much the same as new window 1. However, when I go back and let's say select this wall here and go to 3D with the original window, if I swap in or simply place this window fresh, if I swap in the new window and say OK, you can see how it fits cleanly into the wall with an exact cutout. Now, that window that we were originally matching was set in 1 1/4 inches, and so by choosing that value, it works beautifully. So we now have a new window that will schedule properly and work beautifully in the window legend. However, when I look here, you can see that the symbol for it looks quite different than the symbol of the original window set. Let's look at the options that we have. If I select this new window here and change the floor plan and section to say symbolic, it's going to give me this really complex line pattern, which is basically a top-down view of the morph. The morph is actually segmented, although you don't see it, and that's why it looks really weird. The other one that we were just looking at was projected, so it's basically cutting through the shape at a certain elevation. Now, I would like to make it look similar to this, or perhaps even better than what that is, and that would include things like the wraparound for the drywall and the cladding and just the delineation that we see here. So how can I do that? Well, I'm going to change this to symbolic, and we'll look at how we can modify this 2D line work very, very quickly to match the original line work. Now, the way we'll do that is I'm going to actually select this copy of the wall with the window and explode it. So when you explode something, go to the reshape menu under the edit menu and say explode into current view. And what that will do is it will take 3D elements like this wall with the window and turn them into just 2D graphics. Now, I don't need to keep the original wall with window because this is just one of the copies. So I'm going to end up with, actually, let me just cancel this. I think I had that window selected, so I need to make sure I'm only have the one wall selected and use the explode into current view. So now there's just a single element selected, and I can say OK. Now, initially, the explode looks very weird because the fills here, I go to the fill tool and use the shift key, I can select these 3 fills. They've somehow popped up in front of the other elements. So I'll go under the display order and send to back. Now it's going to look much more like what it did, but there is one extra fill that also needs to be sent to the back here. And now we have something that looks the same here. This is purely 2D, but it looks the same as the original 3 window set. Now, in order to take this line work and put it in this library part, I can simply copy it. Now, in order to avoid getting all of the extraneous pieces like the pieces of the wall, I'll switch the arrow selection from partial selection to completely enclosed. That means that it'll only select things that are totally enclosed. And you can see the shape of the selection marquee has that funny little dashed pattern. So now you can see these elements here, which are a bunch of lines and fills, are selected, but none of the parts outside that were just part of the normal wall. Now I'm going to copy this here, and we'll go to edit this window. So when I want to edit the definition of a window, including the symbol, I can select the window or any library part and go to the File menu, Libraries and Objects, Open Object, or use the keyboard shortcut Command-Option-O or Control-Alt-O. When I do that, it will open up the window, the actual control settings for the window, not the instance that we've placed in a wall, but the definition of the window. And I can go look at the 2D symbol which in this case is coming up in a separate floating window, but I'll go dock it here so that it's now just in the normal tabs that we have in ArchiCAD 20 and above. Now I'll go to the on-screen view options and turn off the true line weight just so we can see this a little bit more easily. And I want to talk about how the thickness of the wall and the inset of the window from the wall are a little bit confusing compared to what we're trying to work with on the plan. Now, what I mean by that is when we're working on the plan here, this window is set in 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches from the edge, and the symbol here was set in actually much further. In order to have this match, we need to go to the window tool and either set it manually or just simply eyedrop one of these windows. So this picked up the settings for one of the windows, and here you can see the reveal depth is 1.25 inches. I'll also eyedrop the wall so that the wall is set up with the appropriate thickness. And now when I go back to the 2D symbol, we'll see how the wall thickness and the window relationship have changed. Now what I'll do is just delete all of the line work that's there, leaving just the center hotspot for the window alignment, and then I'll paste. So I'm using the keyboard shortcut for paste. I'll say just paste it in the center of the current view, and then take this point here, which is the center point of the window outside, and I'll just drop it in on top of the hotspot that is the origin center point for the window. Now if we look closely at this, we'll see that there's now all of the symbolic representation that matches what we had on the floor plan. So let me go, oh shoot, I hit escape rather than completing the operation. So let me go and get that one more time, drop this in and snap it, and then click outside the marquee to drop it in. Now I'll hit save, Command S or Control S, and that will save the library part, the updated library part. And now when I go back to the floor plan, look at how these all look the same, and this is our new window 2. Looks exactly the same as before. Now I may want to actually clean this up a little further. For example, because of the stacking windows, we don't have, a full frame here. So I'll just do a quick little test here where I say that I'd like to just pick up the settings of this line and draw this down here, draw that down here, and perhaps do this here. Now, I'm not sure that this is exactly the way the symbol should be. Maybe the framing should be different, but it certainly looks a little bit more complete now. When I say save and go back to the plan, we'll see here is the new symbol that we've got, a little bit more complete looking. So I've now got a window that has the 3D form and shape, has a beautiful, clean symbol, and I'll just put it into the original wall. So let's get rid of these elements here, which I no longer need. I'll leave these elements here, the morph and the slab, but I'm going to go and put the morph on that layer for object creation. So that way later when I want to possibly do some additional editing on it, it's hidden away on that layer and it isn't in the way, but it's easy to get at. So now let's go back to this area here, and I'll just do a little marquee around this area, and we'll look at this actual building here in 3D. So here you can see just a little excerpt. I'll get rid of the side windows and the top half round, leaving just this one here because I can, instead of deleting all of them and putting it in, I can just swap this one for the new one, which will contain all of the windows. To do that, I'll say that the location that will remain constant is the sill, and I'll say just let's lock in the sill, its distance from the wall base, which happens to be 1 foot 2 and a fraction inches. And now let me go and swap in the new window that is in the embedded library, number 2, and say OK. Now it came in precisely in the right location, except that we need to flip it so it's facing the other way here. Now you can see how beautifully that works. It looks exactly the same as it did before. If we go to our elevation drawing, we're going to see there it is beautifully. And if we go to our window types, instead of having 4 windows there, we're going to have just one, and that window will be showing up just as it should in the window types, as well as, of course, in the window schedule. So I hope you found this useful. I think it will be a good solution for dealing with multiple windows that you're combining together, ganging them together, or stacking them to create a larger assembly. It gets around the limitation that ArchiCAD has of only showing individual library parts in a schedule by essentially creating a new library part. Now, one thing to know is that this library part is not parametric anymore, meaning that if you decided to change the width of the side pieces or something about the glazing pattern, etc., you wouldn't be able to go in and change those settings. But if you did want to do that, you would probably want to just work with the original components, modify them, and follow that process, which would really take about 5 minutes to do. I took a little bit longer because I was explaining all the steps for you. So this is an example of how I help architects and users of ArchiCAD from around the world in my ArchiCAD coaching program. If you'd like to get my personal assistance in my group coaching webinars and by email, then I invite you to check out the ArchiCAD coaching program. It's available separately as well as bundled as part of my ArchiCAD Best Practices 2020 training course. So you'll see link and information on the page next to this video, and I invite you to check it out because I'd love to help you get the most out of ArchiCAD. This has been Eric Bobrow. Thanks for watching.